Sometimes it doesn't matter how much care we provide or how much we love. Even when the family is not our own. Because there are times when fate intervenes and worlds collide. And a night out can end in a nightmare. In true crime, investigation and conviction may take years. But every detective knows that the crucial clue is always there, somewhere in the first 72 hours. Homicide detectives are called to the underground parking garage of a high-rise in Toronto's East End. The badly beaten body of a young woman has been found in a public stairwell.
It was just a truly horrifying and shocking crime scene to look at.
It was very obvious to Detective Como and I that she had suffered some type of sexual attack.
Her pants and underwear were off, her socks were on, her legs were spread apart on this landing. And I thought to myself, this is just a horrible way for someone to meet their end.
I was trying to develop in my mind a scenario of what happened, trying to picture what type of person would actually commit this crime.
Victims are not normally left like this in homicide cases. This was certainly something very, very unusual, and you knew right away that you were dealing with the worst possible type of offender.
Como recognizes the telltale sign of a lust murderer.
A lust murderer will frequently display the victim's body in an attempt to shock members of the public, showing others how proud they are of what they've done to another human being.
The killer could have blonde hair. The forensic team makes another discovery as well.
There was a headset to a Walkman the deceased had on her head, but there was no Walkman at the scene.
They find no purse or anything else that might help identify the victim.
At the scene that morning, there was a man who is asking about his girlfriend. His girlfriend was supposed to come last night to visit him, and she never showed up.
The man lives in the high-rise. He's worried all the police activity has something to do with his girlfriend's disappearance. Her name is Benita DeSagan. He says she's the kind of person who always calls if she's going to be late. The detectives give him the news. Benita's boyfriend tells them where Benita lives, but he's too upset to answer any more questions. Como and McCullough need to know more about Benita. They follow up on the address her boyfriend has given them.
Benita DeSagan was a 37-year-old Filipino nanny who had come here to Toronto to work for a couple who had children.
When Benita's employer hears what has happened, she is overcome. She tells police Benita never gave the family any problems.
She was a good nanny, and her employers, were very pleased to have her here in the city working for them, and that she did a good job with their children, and they enjoyed having her there, living in their house as well.
Benita had been living here for well over a year. She had become part of the family. Upstairs, the detectives searched Benita's room.
One of the important things we found was an empty box that belonged to a Walkman.
The detectives are reminded of the headphones found at the crime scene.
Something I know that lust murderers will do is they will take trophies from their victims to be able to help them relive their fantasies around the murder and the sexual attack on their victims.
The autopsy confirms blunt force trauma to the head was the cause of death. It also confirms Benita DeSagan was raped. Semen is found on her body. Investigators asked that it be sent to the lab for DNA profiling. 72 hours into the investigation, police have an empty Walkman box, a semen sample, and 2 strands of blonde hair.
I found out at that time about a man who lived just a couple of blocks away, who had long blonde hair, who had recently been paroled for attempting to murder a woman.
Detective Como orders that the suspect be put under 24-hour surveillance. When the suspect discards a cigarette, police send it to the lab for DNA testing. The case then takes a turn.
Benita's boyfriend had just returned a motor vehicle that he had purchased to the previous owner, stating he did not want the motor vehicle anymore. This previous owner, on checking the motor vehicle, observed what he thought was blood in the trunk of the car, thought this was very odd, and reported it to the police.
Detective McCullough immediately impounds the vehicle so that forensic tests can be done on it. McCullough and Como return to the high-rise to have a word with their latest suspect.
You know, I asked him to provide a consent sample of his DNA for this case.
Benita's boyfriend can't believe police suspect him of murder, but he agrees to give them the sample. Police receive the test results the following week. Benita's boyfriend is not a match. The ex-convict with the long blonde hair is not a match. And the stains found in the trunk of the car are not even blood stains.
Our leads were starting to dry up. They were coming back negative. It was becoming very frustrating.
I was certainly disappointed in that regard, but knew that we had to just keep going.
1 week into the investigation, all police know is there's a killer at large who likes to keep trophies of his crimes. Police have no suspects in the Benita DeSagan murder case. But when a transit worker finds Benita's purse at the Pape subway station, his discovery gives police a new lead.
Initially, I had no idea where the killer had gone after the murder. But now I had a geographic location that was several miles away from the actual crime scene.
The investigation begins to pick up steam.
It was 2 weeks into the investigation, and we got a phone call from Benita's employers.
Benita's final phone bill has just arrived. It shows her calling card is still being used.
There was up to 44 telephone calls made after she was dead. These telephone calls could have been made by our killer.
I was able to see, where those telephone calls were being made to and where they were being made from. And one of the first things that struck me from the list was that these telephone calls were being made all over the province of Ontario.
The last 10 calls on the phone bill all came from the same number. When police connect that number to a Markham, Ontario address, they come up with their strongest lead to date.
There was a young male in his 20s who lived at that address, who'd been convicted of sexual assault before. This person had sexually assaulted his Asian ex-girlfriend by dragging her into a stairwell at knife point and then forcing himself on her.
The assailant's name is Roman Jans. Police follow him for the next 3 days. When he finally discards an empty bottle, an undercover officer collects it. Police hope the DNA sample they get from the bottle will prove Roman Jans is the killer. A few days later, the test results come in.
I received a telephone call from the biology examiner to tell me that this sample did not match, and I couldn't believe it.
We were very disappointed, and we had to figure out where our investigation was going to go at this point.
You try one thing, if it doesn't work, you have to try something else. And I still had the fact that her killer had used this calling card after the murder. I decided to send teams of investigators to all of the call recipients at the same time, and I was going to get to the bottom of who was using this calling card. With the interview of the person who received the very first phone call, they struck pay dirt.
Como learns the caller was a teenage girl named Kathy. Once he and McCullough hear Kathy made her call from a youth hostel not far from where Bonita's purse was found, they're anxious to talk to her.
We interviewed this young lady who told us that she received this calling card number from a friend of hers.
She was laughing because she said that her friend had fallen asleep at the table, and so all of the young people staying at the hostel had then taken that calling card number themselves, and they were all using it to phone all over the province.
Police ask Kathy for her friend's name. She tells them it's Michael Wall. She says the two of them aren't close. The detectives advise her not to tell Wall about their visit.
At this point, Michael Wall became the biggest priority in the investigation, because here was the person who was in actual possession of that calling card that belonged to the deceased the morning after the murder.
A surveillance team waits for Wall outside the hostel.
We're instructed to follow him, see where he goes, see what he does, try to get the DNA sample. And we just sort of hide in the crowds and hide in a car and just try to look not too suspicious.
When police do a background check on Michael Wall, they learn he is only 18 years old.
His mother had, in fact, disowned him, and his father had kicked him out of the house as well because of problems and difficulties he'd had with him. And this is why he ended up at this youth hostel.
Wall rides the public transit system for hours on end. He does not appear to go to school or to have a job. He spends most of his time alone. After 2 days of surveillance, Detective Woodhouse still has no DNA sample.
He was on foot after he got off the transit system, and he walked into a park area. He walks down an embankment near a river. I'm quite a ways off, but I want to get a little closer, so I bring up my camera, start taking pictures. And I zoom in on what he's doing, and he's actually masturbating. And I can't believe it.
Once Wall leaves the area, Woodhouse moves in.
I locate a condom with a discharge inside, and I called Al Como, and I said, Al, you're not gonna believe this. I got you a sample. And he goes, oh, that's good. I said, yeah, Al, but it's a semen sample. And he said, pardon?
Woodhouse discovers something else as well. From where Wall was standing, he could see the high-rise where Benita DeSagan was raped and murdered.
I just couldn't believe it when I heard it. This is one of the characteristics of a lust murderer, that they'll return to the scene of the crime to be able to relive their fantasies of what they've done to the victim. I believed in my mind that finally I was going to be onto the right guy.
Wall's behavior in the park has given detectives cause for alarm.
We decided to put a double team onto him and continue around the clock.
Lust murderers often become serial killers.
I was extremely worried that he was gearing up to do another attack.
Police suspect they know who raped and murdered Filipino nanny Benita DeSagan. But they're still waiting for the test results they need to prove Michael Wall is the killer. The day after their shocking discovery in the park, police follow Wall back to the very same place.
We're pretty sure this man is the suspect we're looking for. You don't want to lose this gentleman. You don't want to spook him. You just want everything to go well, want everything to go smooth. So there's a lot more pressure. He's carrying a yellow bag, and it appears really heavy.
Woodhouse spots a woman on a path nearby.
I alerted the crew to tighten it up. If he starts following this woman, we want to make sure nothing happens.
Wall begins to follow the woman.
He's getting closer and closer. I don't care about surveillance at this time. We're going to have to stop this man.
Woodhouse gives the order to take Wall down. But his order comes too late.
All I could see is his arm coming up. And he just struck this woman. My mind is, oh my God, he's just killed somebody else.
As soon as he sees the police, Wall flees the scene.
I'm very upset with myself, thinking I didn't contain it properly. I'm concerned with the woman, but this man is not going to get away.
The surveillance team loses sight of Wall, but Woodhouse grew up in these parts. He directs his men to a clearing by Warden Avenue.
And as it turned out, he did run into the area. I thought he would come out.
Police recover the bag Wall discarded. It's full of bricks. The woman is taken to hospital, and in time, she recovers. Wall is brought to police headquarters and asked to empty his pockets. One item draws McCullough's attention.
Mr. Wall actually had a missing calling card in his possession.
But that's not the most incriminating piece of evidence. Police inform Wall his DNA is a match to the killer's DNA found in the first 72 hours of the investigation. Michael Wall is charged with the rape and murder of Benita DeSagan.
I asked him whether he wished to provide a statement, and the only thing he said was, "I didn't kill anybody."
But the detectives have reason to believe otherwise. They're confident that on the night of the murder, Michael Wall was looking for a victim. Benita DeSagan had spent the day at home with the family she had grown close to. She had the night off. Once she made sure family members had what they needed, she went out to spend time with her boyfriend. But she ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Michael Wall saw an opportunity late at night when Benita DeSagan got off a transit bus and started walking northbound. It's what we refer to as a blitz attack. where, without warning, he overpowers his victim.
Wall dragged Benita into a stairwell and kept pounding her with a bag full of bricks.
He dragged her down several landings where he undressed her. And while she was dying from these massive head wounds, he sexually assaulted her.
When police search Wall's room at the hostel, they come back with Benita's Walkman and a chilling revelation.
His roommate was able to tell us on the night of the murder, when Michael Wall returned to the hostel, he said to the roommate with a big grin and a smile on his face, "I got it. I got it tonight."
What Wall got that night was the fulfillment of a lust murderer's sick fantasy. But it came at a terrible price. Halfway through his trial, Wall pled guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 25 years. The stories on 72 Hours are true. The detectives and forensic scientists are the ones who actually worked on the case.